They laughed before they looked at the child. In the crowded public hospital corridor, Aissatou Diallo stood clutching her daughter's small body as nurses whispered and strangers stared. The girl's breathing rattled, thin, urgent. Beside Isatu stood a man in worn clothes, dust on his sleeves, eyes steady but unreadable. "Why bring a beggar here?" someone scoffed. "Charity mistakes don't get priority," a nurse said, already turning away. Security stepped in, guiding the man back as if he were the disease. Isatu tried to explain softly, respectfully, but shame rose faster than her words. The child whimpered. The doors stayed closed. Outside, the city hummed unbothered. No one knew that the man they pushed away owned the ground beneath their feet. And when the truth surfaced, it would leave no one untouched.
Before we continue, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? If stories of justice, healing, and quiet courage speak to you, subscribe and stay with us.
Aissatou Diallo woke every morning before the city remembered itself, before buses filled the roads, before shopkeepers lifted their shutters, before the sun reached the low concrete rooms stacked behind the industrial zone. Her alarm was not a phone. It was habit carved into her bones by years of survival. She rose quietly, so she wouldn't wake Amara too soon. The child slept, curled on a thin mattress, her chest rising and falling with a fragile rhythm that never failed to tighten Isatu's heart. Some mornings the sound was smooth. Other mornings it rasped, shallow and uneven, as if Amara were borrowing air from somewhere else. Isatu knelt beside her and listened. Only when she was sure the breathing was steady did she wash her face in cold water and tie her headscarf. The mirror above the basin was cracked, splitting her reflection in two. One side tired, the other resolute. She looked at neither for long. By 5 o'clock, she was already walking toward the factory. The garment plant sat at the edge of the city like an afterthought. Long gray windowed only where it needed light to extract labor. Isatu wore the same faded uniform, everyday blue trousers, gray shirt, and gloves that never quite fit. Her job was sanitation. Floors, toilets, waste bins, spills no one else wanted to see. People rarely noticed her unless something was wrong. She scrubbed in silence while machines roared and supervisors shouted over the noise. She moved quickly, efficiently, careful not to draw attention. Attention was dangerous. Attention came with comments, laughter, questions that were not really questions. Especially now. The whispers had started months ago when her pregnancy became impossible to hide. They followed her through corridors, floated behind her as she pushed her cleaning cart. She doesn't even have a husband. I heard the father sleeps on the street. Imagine choosing that life. When Amara was born, the whispers hardened into certainty. By the time Isatu returned to work after maternity leave, everyone knew, or thought they did. The story had spread faster than truth ever could. Aissatou Diallo, poor worker, had a child with a beggar. No one asked her how it happened. No one asked what she had seen in him. They only laughed at what they believed she had lost. The worst of it came from Victor Chisholm Okiki, the floor manager. Victor liked order, or rather, he liked control, disguised as order. He wore polished shoes that never touched dirt and spoke loudly enough for rooms to hear him, even when silence would have done. To him, workers were replaceable parts, especially ones like Isatu. One afternoon, as she mopped near the lockers, Victor stopped walking. "So," he said casually, "is the father coming to pick you up today, or is he busy begging?" Laughter rippled through the nearby workers. Isatu kept her eyes on the floor. Victor smiled. "You know, some people work hard to rise above their circumstances. Others invite shame into their homes." She did not respond. She never did. Silence was her armor, thin but necessary. After her shift, Isatu collected Amara from the neighbor who watched her during work hours. The woman meant well but asked too many questions. Isatu thanked her, lifted Amara onto her hip, and began the walk home. That was when she saw Ibrahim Mensa. He sat near the bus stop just beyond the market stalls, as he often did. His clothes were worn but clean. His beard was trimmed. He did not shout or wave a cup like others nearby. He simply sat watching the world pass with an attention that felt almost gentle. When Amara saw him, her face lit up. "Papa," she whispered, reaching out. Aissatou felt the familiar tightening in her chest, part fear, part something else she refused to name. She adjusted Amara on her hip and walked toward him. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. Ibrahim stood careful not to move too quickly. "I wanted to see her." He knelt so Amara could touch his face, his smile small but unmistakably real. He asked about her breathing, about her appetite, about whether the night had been cold. He always asked the right questions. Isatu handed him a small plastic bag with leftover bread. He shook his head, for later she insisted, "You need to eat." He accepted it without argument. He always did, but never greedily, never as if it were owed. They walked together for part of the way, Amara between them, her hands clasped in theirs like a fragile bridge. People stared, some openly, some with thinly veiled amusement. Isatu had learned to walk through it. At home, Ibrahim helped her fix a loose hinge on the door, with tools he somehow always had. He checked the window for drafts. He showed Amara a game using bottle caps and a string. "You know," Isatu said quietly, as she stirred a pot of thin stew. "People talk." He nodded. "People always do. They say I ruined my life." He looked at her then, not with pity, not with defense, but with a calm that unsettled her. "They don't know your life," he said, "only the part they want to judge." She watched him as he spoke. His English was careful, precise, educated, not the language of the streets. She had noticed that, long ago, along with the way he observed details, others missed the schedules of buses, the habits of security guards, the patterns of hospitals and offices. Sometimes she wondered, but she never asked. That night after Ibrahim left, Isatu lay beside Amara and stared at the ceiling. Her body ached. Her mind replayed Victor's voice, the laughter, the looks. She thought of the hospital corridor from the morning before, the way security had stepped between Ibrahim and the door, the way no one had cared until they believed someone important might be watching. She pressed her palm against Amara's back, feeling the small rise and fall. Whatever the world believed about her, Isatu knew one thing. With painful clarity, she had not chosen shame. She had chosen kindness, and the cost of that choice was something she paid every day quietly, without witnesses. Outside, the city continued its restless breathing, unaware that the smallest lives often carried the heaviest weight. And somewhere within its streets, unseen forces were already moving slowly, deliberately, toward a reckoning no one was prepared for. Aissatou Diallo did not fall in love the way stories promised. There were no sudden sparks, no sweeping moments that announced themselves as destiny. What she felt for Ibrahim Mensa grew the way endurance did, slowly, quietly, shaped by repetition and necessity. She met him on a day when the city felt particularly unforgiving. It had been a long shift at the factory. A machine had broken, tempers had flared, and Victor Okiki had spent the afternoon reminding everyone how easily they could be replaced. By the time Isatu left work, her legs trembled with fatigue. She stopped at the market to buy the cheapest vegetables she could find, counting coins twice before handing them over. That was when she saw Ibrahim for the first time. He sat on the edge of the pavement near the bus terminal, slightly apart from the other men who begged loudly for attention. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't calling out. He was simply there. His hands folded, his eyes lifted toward the road as if he were waiting for something or someone. Most people walked past him without seeing him at all. Isatu noticed him because he didn't look desperate. He looked tired in a different way. Not broken but worn, as if he had once belonged somewhere and had chosen for reasons unknown to step outside of it. She hesitated. Her bag was light. Dinner would already be thin. But something in his stillness unsettled her, more than his poverty. She reached into the bag, took out the wrapped bread she had bought for herself, and held it out. "You should eat," she said. He looked at her hand for a moment, then up at her face. "Thank you," he replied, his voice calm, measured. His accent was neutral, carefully so. "But are you sure?" She nodded. "I can find something else." That was a lie, but she told it easily. He accepted the bread with a small inclination of his head, as if acknowledging a gift that mattered. He did not tear into it. He thanked her again and waited until she walked away before taking a bite. That should have been the end of it. But the city has a way of circling the same paths, and Isatu passed that bus stop again the next evening, and the next. Each time, Ibrahim was there. Sometimes reading a folded newspaper someone had discarded, sometimes watching the traffic, never asking. After a week, she began to greet him. After 2 weeks, she began to sit beside him for a few minutes, just long enough to rest her legs and breathe before heading home. They talked about small things at first: the heat, the buses that never arrived on time, the rising price of maize. Ibrahim listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were careful, thoughtful. He never complained, never explained how he had come to be where he was. And Isatu, who had learned that questions often carried judgment, did not ask. One evening, she arrived pale and shaking, clutching her stomach. He noticed immediately. "Are you all right?" he asked. She hesitated, then sat down heavily beside him. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been feeling strange." He watched her closely, not intrusively, but with attention that felt practiced. He asked about her symptoms, about timing, about her diet. When she told him she might be pregnant, he did not react the way she expected. He did not smile. He did not panic. He nodded slowly. "You should see a doctor." She laughed softly, without humor. "Doctors cost money. Some don't," he replied. "There are clinics." He gave her directions, precise ones, names, times to go when lines were shortest. She stared at him. "How do you know all this?" "I pay attention," he said simply. When the test confirmed her pregnancy, Isatu cried alone in her room. Not from joy, not from fear alone, from the weight of knowing that her life, already narrow, had just narrowed further. She found Ibrahim the next day and told him. He listened without interrupting. "I don't expect anything from you," she said quickly, her voice tight. "I just needed someone to know." He was quiet for a long moment. "This child," he said finally, "will not be alone." She looked at him sharply. "You don't have to say that." "I know," he replied, "but I mean it." From that day on, he changed not in presence but in purpose. He began saving small amounts from somewhere Isatu never saw. He brought vitamins. He walked her part of the way home when the streets felt unsafe. He never stayed the night, never crossed boundaries she didn't invite him to cross. When her belly began to show, the stares began too. Neighbors whispered. Co-workers speculated openly. Someone told Victor Okeki, and the manager's amusement turned sharp. "So it's true," Victor said one morning, blocking her path. "A child, with a man who sleeps on concrete." Isatu said nothing. The pregnancy was hard. She worked until her back screamed and her ankles swelled. Ibrahim worried in his quiet way, urging her to rest, to eat more. She did what she could. When Amara was born small and fragile, Isatu feared the world had already decided against her. Ibrahim was there at the clinic waiting outside when visitors were not allowed. He did not touch the baby until Isatu placed Amara in his arms herself. He held her as if she were something sacred. "She's beautiful," he said. Isatu watched him, then noticing the way his hands were steady, the way his eyes softened without becoming weak. Something inside her shifted. Life did not become easier after that. If anything, it grew harsher. The laughter louder, the judgments crueler. But Ibrahim remained a constant in a world that offered none. He never defended himself when insulted, never raised his voice, never explained who he was or why he lived as he did. Sometimes in the quiet moments, Isatu wondered if love was supposed to look like this. Not grand, not safe, but present. And though she did not yet have words for it, she sensed that whatever story the world was telling about Ibrahim Mensa, it was incomplete. The day Aissatou Diallo told her co-workers she was pregnant, the room changed temperature. It happened in the break area. Nothing formal, nothing announced. Someone asked why she was moving more slowly. Another joked about her avoiding heavy bins. Isatu answered honestly, because lying felt heavier than truth. "I'm expecting," she said. Silence followed. Then a ripple of looks passed between them, quick and sharp like a message sent without words. "With who?" someone asked, already smiling. Isatu did not answer. She gathered her bag and left the room, her heart beating faster than her feet. She knew then that the story would not belong to her anymore. By the next morning, it belonged to everyone. People spoke openly now. They did not lower their voices when she passed. They did not pretend concern. The pregnancy was no longer a fact. It was evidence. She trapped herself. Couldn't even find a proper man. "I heard he sleeps near the bus stop." By the end of the week, Victor Okeke called her into his office. He did not offer a chair, so he said, leaning back, folding his arms, "You're bringing a child into this world with a man who has nothing." Isatu stood straight, her hands clasped in front of her. "My personal life does not affect my work," Victor laughed. "Everything affects your work. Image, discipline, judgment." His eyes moved slowly over her. "You used to be invisible. Now you're a distraction." She felt the familiar burn rise in her chest, but kept her voice steady. "I will continue to do my job." "I'm sure you will," he said. "Just don't expect sympathy when consequences arrive." Outside the office, her knees nearly gave way. That evening, she found Ibrahim at the bus stop, sitting as he always did. The city light caught the dust on his shoes, the wear on his jacket. He stood when he saw her face. "What happened?" he asked. She told him everything. He listened without interruption, his expression calm but intent. When she finished, she expected reassurance words, promises, anger. Instead, he asked a simple question. "Do you want me to speak to him?" She shook her head immediately. "No. That would only make it worse." He nodded. "Then I won't." They sat in silence for a while, watching buses come and go. The air smelled of fuel and fried food. Isatu rested a hand on her stomach, feeling the faint flutter that had begun to make itself known. "I don't regret this," she said suddenly, "even if they think I should." Ibrahim looked at her. Really looked. "Regret belongs to people who believe they had better options," he said. "You chose honesty." The pregnancy advanced, and with it the pressure. At home, her landlord began asking questions. "Children make noise," he said. "Noise brings complaints." Neighbors offered advice that felt more like warnings. "You should send the child away. You should leave before people talk too much. You should not let that man be seen with you." Isatu heard them all and carried them like stones in her pockets. Ibrahim continued to appear and disappear in the steady rhythm of her days. He brought fruit when he could. He walked her to the clinic when she allowed it. He stayed outside during appointments, pacing slowly, counting time with his steps. Once she caught him watching the building across the street with an intensity that startled her. When she followed his gaze, she saw nothing but offices. "What are you looking at?" she asked. "Patterns," he replied. "They tell you who holds power." She frowned. "You speak like someone who has known it." He smiled faintly. Everyone knows power, he said. Some just forget. When labor began, it was early, too early. Pain seized her while she was mopping a stairwell. She dropped the bucket and slid down the wall, breathing through the shock as co-workers shouted. Someone called Victor. Someone else called a taxi. Ibrahim arrived before the car. He took control without raising his voice. He wrapped her in his jacket, guided her breathing, told the driver where to go. At the clinic, he stayed close but out of the way, speaking to staff with a calm authority that cut through their impatience. Amara was born small and silent. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then she cried, thin but determined. Aissatou wept openly, relief breaking through fear like rain through dust. Ibrahim stood a few steps back, his hands clenched, his face composed in a way that did not hide emotion so much as contain it. "She's here," Aissatou whispered. "She's here." Afterward, when visiting hours ended, Ibrahim waited outside with a paper cup of tea, growing cold in his hands. When a nurse finally brought Amara to him wrapped in a faded blanket, he accepted her carefully as if afraid to disturb something ancient. "She's strong," he said quietly. Isatu watched him from the bed. She noticed again the way he held himself, not like a man with nothing, but like a man carrying something heavy and choosing not to set it down. The weeks that followed were the hardest of her life. Sleep came in fragments. Money disappeared faster than it arrived. Amara struggled to feed, to breathe, to settle. Isatu returned to work sooner than she should have, her body still aching, her heart stretched thin. The whispers returned louder than before. She should be grateful she has a job at all. Who brings a sick baby into the world like that? Her man won't last. One afternoon, as Isatu left the factory with Amara wrapped against her chest, she found Ibrahim waiting near the gate. Victor saw him too. "Well, well," the manager called out, stepping forward. "The proud father returns." Workers slowed to watch. Ibrahim met Victor's gaze without flinching. "Is there a problem?" Victor smiled. "Only curiosity. I wonder how long you plan to pretend." Ibrahim tilted his head slightly. "Pretend what? That this child has a future," Victor said, his voice carrying. "That her mother didn't ruin her life by choosing you." Isatu felt something inside her break, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Before she could speak, Ibrahim stepped forward, placing himself subtly between her and Victor. "Be careful," he said softly. "Words create records." Victor laughed. "Threatening me?" From the pavement, Ibrahim's expression did not change. "No," he said. "I'm reminding you." They left without another word, but the tension followed them home. That night, as Amara slept fitfully, Isatu lay awake staring at the ceiling. The future felt like a narrow bridge suspended over emptiness. She did not know how long she could keep walking without falling. Yet even in that fear, one truth remained steady. She had chosen this child. She had chosen kindness, and she would carry the weight of those choices, whatever the cost. Unseen by her, unseen by the city forces long set in motion, were nearing collision, and when they met, no amount of laughter would be enough to drown out the truth. Amara's cries had a different sound when something was wrong. Isatu learned that quickly. There was the ordinary fussing, hunger, discomfort, the protest of a child adjusting to a world that felt too large. And then there was this, a thin, strained cry that seemed to come from deeper inside, as if Amara were arguing with her own lungs. Those were the nights Isatu did not sleep. She would sit upright on the mattress, Amara pressed against her chest, counting breaths the way nurses had taught her. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2. Too shallow, pause, too long. Fear became a quiet companion, settling beside her like a shadow she could not shake. Money vanished quickly. Clinic visits cost more than she expected. Medication even more. Each time she reached into her bag, it felt lighter, as if the coins themselves were fleeing. She skipped meals without thinking, telling herself she wasn't hungry. Hunger was easier than panic. Ibrahim noticed everything. He came with small, careful offerings, a packet of medicine. He said he found cheaper at a different pharmacy. A blanket warmer than the one Aissatou owned, a list of breathing exercises written neatly on a scrap of paper. "You should raise her head when she sleeps," he said one evening, demonstrating gently. "It helps." Isatu watched him with a mix of gratitude and unease. "How do you know all this?" He hesitated just for a moment. "I've seen it before." She wanted to ask where. She didn't. As Amara grew, her fragility did not fade. Some days she laughed easily, clapping at shadows and bottle caps. Other days her chest tightened without warning, her breath hitching as if the air had turned thick. It happened once at the factory. Isatu had brought Amara with her because the neighbor was sick. She tucked the child in a corner with a blanket and toys, hoping to finish her shift unnoticed. For a while it worked. Then Amara began to cough. At first, Isatu tried to soothe her quietly, but the coughing grew sharper, faster. Amara's face reddened, then paled. Panic surged. A moment, Isatu whispered to a co-worker, lifting Amara into her arms. Victor Okeke noticed immediately. "What is that?" he snapped, striding over. "My child, she's unwell," Isatu said, her voice shaking. "I just need a few minutes." Victor's face hardened. "This is not a daycare." Before Isatu could respond, Amara gasped an ugly, frightening sound. Isatu froze. Ibrahim appeared from nowhere. He knelt beside them, calm and focused, his movements efficient. He adjusted Amara's position, instructed Isatu to count breaths with him. He spoke softly, steadily, as if calming himself as much as the child. Slowly, he said, "She needs calm." People gathered, murmuring. Victor stood stiffly, unsure whether to intervene. Within minutes, Amara's breathing eased. Isatu sagged with relief, tears spilling before she could stop them. Ibrahim handed her a small inhaler. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "I had one," he replied. For a child, he met her eyes. For emergencies. The words stayed with her long after the crisis passed. That evening, after Victor had dismissed her early with a warning about professional boundaries, Isatu walked home with Ibrahim in silence. "You shouldn't keep those things," she said finally. "People already talk." He nodded. "I know. Then why do you stay?" He stopped walking. "For the same reason you do," he said. "Because leaving would be easier." She looked at him, then really looked. His jacket was threadbare at the elbows. His shoes were cracked. But his posture, his restraint felt out of place, like a man wearing a costume too convincing to question. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "I think you see the world differently." A faint smile touched his lips. "Everyone does," he replied. "Most just don't admit it." As weeks passed, small inconsistencies began to surface. Ibrahim knew which doctors were competent before meeting them. He recognized security routines at buildings he claimed never to enter. He spoke on borrowed phones with a politeness that suggested familiarity with power, not fear of it. Once, when Isatu complained about the rising cost of transport, he told her without thinking, "It won't last. They're restructuring routes." She stared at him. "Who is restructuring?" He paused. "The city." "Which part of the city?" she pressed. He looked away. "The part that never asks permission." At the factory, Victor's behavior grew more aggressive. He called Isatu into his office, repeatedly, citing mistakes that were not hers. He reassigned her to heavier sections, shortened her breaks, hinted openly that her situation made her replaceable. "You should be grateful," he said one afternoon. "People like you don't get second chances." Isatu returned home that day, shaking with exhaustion and anger. Ibrahim noticed immediately. He wants something, Ibrahim said quietly after she told him. And it isn't your work, she swallowed. I won't give it to him. I know. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. That night, Amara's breathing worsened. It happened suddenly without warning. One moment she was sleeping. The next she was gasping, her small chest heaving violently. Aissatou panicked, fumbling for her bag. Ibrahim, she called. He was already there. He moved with urgency, now no hesitation. He lifted. Amara instructed Isatu, sharply, but calmly checked her color, her pulse. He made a decision. We're going now, he said. To where, Isatu asked, her hands trembling. The nearest hospital, he replied. And if they delay, we go somewhere else. Outside the street was nearly empty. Ibrahim flagged down a car with authority, not desperation. The driver did not argue. At the hospital, they were made to wait. She needs oxygen, Isatu pleaded. Please. The nurse glanced at Ibrahim's clothes, then at the paperwork. Payment first. Ibrahim stepped forward. She's a child. So are many, the nurse replied, turning away. Isatu felt the familiar weight of humiliation pressed down on her chest. She reached for her bag, already knowing it would not be enough. Ibrahim touched her arm. Wait. He borrowed a phone from a passerby and stepped aside. His voice was low-controlled. He spoke briefly, precisely. When he returned, his expression had not changed. They'll take her now, he said. Within minutes, staff moved. Oxygen was brought. A doctor appeared. The delay evaporated as if it had never existed. Isatu stared at Ibrahim, stunned. What did you say? She asked. I asked for help, he replied. That's all. He looked at her gently. Sometimes help listens. Amara stabilized. The doctor explained the condition manageable, but serious. Follow-ups were necessary. Medication would be ongoing. When visiting hours ended, Ibrahim stood to leave. Where are you going? Isatu asked, panic rising again. I need to take care of something, he said. I'll be back. He did not explain. He rarely did. As Isatu watched him walk away down the corridor, a realization settled over her. Not fully formed, but heavy with possibility. Whatever story the world told about Ibrahim Mensa, it was incomplete. And whatever truth he was carrying, it was moving closer, quietly, deliberately, toward the surface. By the time Aissatou Diallo returned to work after Amara's hospital stay, the factory felt different. It always smelled the same oil, fabric, dust, disinfectant, but something in the air had shifted. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Eyes followed her movements with a sharpness that felt newly intentional. The rumors had evolved. They were no longer just about who she had chosen. They were about how long she would be allowed to stay. Victor Chisholm Okeke made sure of that. He waited until mid-morning when the floor was loud and crowded, before calling her name. Not from his office, from the center of the production line. Isatu, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. Bring your cart. She did, slowly. Every step felt heavier than the last. Victor stood with his arms crossed, surveying a spill near one of the machines. This area hasn't been cleaned properly, he announced. We can't have standards slipping. Isatu glanced down. The floor was clean. She had mopped it twice already. I'll do it again, she said quietly. That's not the point, Victor replied. The point is reliability. Workers nearby pretended to focus on their tasks, but their attention was unmistakable. Victor knew exactly what he was doing. Your situation, he continued, lowering his voice just enough to sound almost reasonable, has made you distracted. Isatu straightened. My work has not changed. Victor smiled thinly. Your circumstances have. He gestured toward her hands. Single mother, sick child, no husband, a man who can't even provide for himself. The words landed like blows, measured and deliberate. You should be grateful, Victor went on. We're not heartless here. We understand hardship, but understanding has limits. Aissatou swallowed. What are you saying? I'm saying, Victor replied, leaning closer, that there are ways to make things easier. For both of us. The implication hung between them, heavy and unmistakable. Aissatou felt heat rise behind her eyes, not tears but anger. Cold, steady anger. No, she said. Victor raised an eyebrow. No, no, she repeated louder now. I do my job, that is all. For a moment, something flashed across Victor's face, surprise, then irritation. He stepped back, masking it with a shrug. Very well, he said. Then don't be surprised when reality catches up. The next weeks were relentless. Aissatou's schedule changed without warning. She was assigned the heaviest sections of the plant areas no one wanted. Her breaks were shortened. Requests for time off for Amara's appointments were denied. When she protested, Victor reminded her of policy. When she appealed to human resources, her complaints disappeared into silence. At home, the pressure followed. Her landlord knocked more frequently, now complaining about noise that did not exist. Neighbors who once greeted her politely now watched from behind curtains. Someone left a note under her door. People like you bring problems. Isatu read it once, then burned it over the stove. Ibrahim noticed the changes immediately. You're thinner, he said one evening, handing her a bag of fruit. And you're tired in a way sleep won't fix. She tried to brush it off. It's nothing. He shook his head. It's not nothing. She told him about Victor, about the comments, the pressure, the unspoken threats. She did not mention the implication directly, but Ibrahim understood. He's abusing his position, Ibrahim said quietly. That's how things work, Isatu replied. People like him always find a way. Only if no one stops them. She looked at him sharply. You said you wouldn't get involved. I said I wouldn't speak to him, Ibrahim corrected. Not that I wouldn't pay attention. She sighed. Please, I just need to get through this. Ibrahim studied her for a long moment. Sometimes getting through costs more than fighting, he said. At the factory, Victor escalated. One afternoon, he called Isatu into his office and closed the door behind her. You're struggling, he said, feigning concern. I see that. She remained standing. If there's a problem with my work, say it. There's a problem with your life, Victor replied smoothly. And it's spilling into my workplace. He leaned back in his chair. I could help you. She felt her stomach twist. How I have influence, he said. Schedules, contracts, recommendations. His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. I could make sure you keep this job, even get lighter duties. Isatu's voice was steady when she answered. At what cost? Victor smiled. Don't be dramatic. I'm not, she said. I'm saying no. The smile vanished. Think carefully, he warned. People in your position don't get many chances. She opened the door and left without another word. The retaliation was swift. Her name appeared on a list for performance review. Co-workers were warned not to cover her shifts. A formal notice cited repeated inefficiencies. Isatu took the paper home and stared at it, long after Amara had fallen asleep. I might lose my job, she said to Ibrahim that night. He nodded as if he had expected it. If you do, you won't be alone. That doesn't pay rent, she replied bitterly. No, he agreed, but it buys time. The next morning, Ibrahim walked Isatu and Amara to the factory gate. Victor was there, talking with security. When he saw Ibrahim, he smirked. Ah, the family arrives. Workers slowed, sensing a spectacle. You know, Victor said loudly, it's impressive, the confidence, coming here every day like you belong. Ibrahim met his gaze calmly. Everyone belongs somewhere. Victor laughed. Not everywhere. He turned to Isatu. You should reconsider my offer. Before she could respond, Ibrahim stepped forward. not aggressively, but deliberately. "Be careful," he said softly. "There are records." Victor scoffed. "You think I'm afraid of you?" Ibrahim did not answer. He simply looked at him, a long, unreadable look that made Victor shift uncomfortably, despite himself. "People forget," Ibrahim said finally, "that power leaves footprints." Victor's laughter faltered. "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation." Security cleared their throats. Someone coughed. The moment passed awkward and unresolved. Inside the factory, Aissatou worked with renewed determination. She refused to give Victor the satisfaction of seeing her break. But the strain was undeniable. One evening, as she left work, she noticed a car parked across the street, dark, unmarked. A man inside watched the factory entrance without trying to hide it. She mentioned it to Ibrahim. He nodded once. "I thought so. What does that mean?" "It means things are moving," he said, faster than Victor realizes. She studied his face. "You keep saying things like that." He met her eyes. "Because they're true." That night, after Amara finally slept, Isatu sat alone, listening to the city breathe through the open window. Fear pressed in on all sides of losing her job, her home, her fragile stability. But beneath it all, another feeling stirred. Not hope, not yet. Resolve. She had endured too much to be pushed quietly into nothing. And though she did not yet know how or when, she sensed that Victor Okeke's careful cruelty had awakened forces far beyond his control. The cost of his choices was coming. The morning Victor Okeke decided to make an example of Ibrahim Mensa, the factory gates were already crowded. Workers streamed in as usual, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed ahead. The day promised heat. The air carried that familiar blend of oil and dust. Aissatou Diallo arrived with Amara strapped to her back, her steps careful, her face set in quiet determination. Ibrahim walked beside her. He rarely came this early. Usually he waited until her shift ended, appearing like a constant that did not demand acknowledgement. Today was different. He had insisted on accompanying her all the way to the gate. "I can manage," Isatu had said. "I know," Ibrahim replied. "I'm still coming." They reached the entrance, just as Victor finished giving instructions to security. He wore his authority like armor, polished, loud, unchallenged. When he saw Ibrahim, his expression shifted into something like amusement. "Well, look at that," Victor said, raising his voice just enough for others to hear. "Our regular guest decided to come inside today." Several workers slowed. Phones appeared discreetly lifted. Curiosity sharpened the air. Ibrahim stopped a few steps from the gate. "I'm not here to enter." Victor smiled. "Good, because this isn't a shelter." Isatu felt Amara stir against her back. She adjusted the cloth, her heart pounding. "Let's go," she whispered to Ibrahim. Victor wasn't finished. "You know," he said, circling them, "I've been meaning to ask, how does it feel watching a woman ruin her life for you?" A few people laughed nervously. Others looked away. Ibrahim remained still. "She ruined nothing," Victor snorted. "You don't even have a life to ruin." He turned to the security guards. "Why is he allowed to loiter here every day?" One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. "He's not causing trouble." "That's not the point," Victor snapped. "This place has standards." He stepped closer to Ibrahim, close enough that Isatu could smell Victor's cologne over the dust. "Leave," Victor said, "and don't come back." Ibrahim met his gaze. "This is a public road." Victor laughed. "You think technicalities protect you?" Isatu felt something snap inside her, not loudly but decisively. She took a step forward. "Stop," she said. Victor turned to her, surprised. "Excuse me? Leave him alone," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "If you have a problem, take it up with me." Victor's eyes flicked to the phones, now openly recording. He smiled thinly. "Very well," he said. "Let's talk about you." He gestured toward Amara. "This child. How many times has she disrupted operations? How many times have you needed special treatment?" "That's not true," Isatu said. "Isn't it?" Victor replied. "We've been patient, but patience has limits." Ibrahim stepped forward, then not aggressively, but with purpose. He positioned himself between Victor and Isatu. His posture, calm, his voice low. "Enough," he said. Victor's smile hardened. "You're bold today." "I'm precise," Ibrahim replied. "There's a difference." The words seemed to unsettle Victor more than shouting would have. He recovered quickly. "Security," Victor called. "Remove him." Two guards hesitated. They looked at Ibrahim and then at Victor. The cameras were everywhere now. "He hasn't done anything," one guard said quietly. Victor's face darkened. "Do your job." Ibrahim raised a hand slightly. "I'll go." Aissatu's breath caught. "Ibrahim." He turned to her. "It's all right." Victor smirked. "Finally. Some sense." Ibrahim took a step back, then another. As he did, he spoke not to Victor, but to the gathered workers. "Be careful what you applaud," he said calmly. "It has a way of returning." Victor laughed loudly, too loudly. "Threats now." "From a man who owns nothing." Ibrahim paused at the edge of the crowd. He looked back at Victor, his eyes steady. "Nothing," he repeated. "That's what you think." Then he left. The tension lingered long after the gate swallowed him. Inside, Isatu worked with hands that trembled despite her efforts. The humiliation replayed itself again and again, the laughter, the cameras, the way Victor had enjoyed it. During her break, she checked her phone. Messages were already circulating. "Did you see the beggar today? This is what happens when you don't know your place. Poor girl. She chose badly." She put the phone away and focused on breathing. Victor did not speak to her for the rest of the shift. That silence was more frightening than his words. When she left the factory, Ibrahim was nowhere to be seen. Panic fluttered in her chest. She walked home alone, Amara heavy against her back, her thoughts racing. Had she pushed him too far? Had she put him in danger? She knew the city could be cruel to men like him. Men without protection, without names that mattered. At home, she found him sitting on the step outside her door. Relief washed over her so suddenly it made her dizzy. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I shouldn't have." He stood. "You did nothing wrong. They recorded you," she said. "They're mocking you everywhere." He nodded. "I know." She studied his face, searching for anger, hurt, anything. She found none. "Why don't you defend yourself?" she asked quietly. "Why do you let them believe that about you?" Ibrahim was silent for a long moment. "Because," he said finally, "some truths lose their power when spoken too early." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he replied gently, "that timing matters." That night, Isatu slept poorly. She dreamed of factory gates closing, of hands pushing her back, of Amara's breath disappearing into silence. When she woke, her chest ached. The next day, Victor struck again. A formal notice waited for Isatu at the front desk. "Gross misconduct," it read. "Repeated violations, external disturbances." Her hands shook as she held the paper. "You're suspended," the clerk said. Not unkindly. "Pending review." Isatu walked out of the building in a daze. The world felt distant, muted. She sat on the curb and called Ibrahim. He answered immediately. "I've been suspended," she said. "I know," he replied. That stopped her. "How I told you," he said softly. "I pay attention." She closed her eyes. "What are we going to do? We're going to wait," he said. "And we're going to be ready." For what? For the moment they think they've won. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the city's uneven skyline, Isatu watched Ibrahim from across the room. He sat with Amara, showing her how to stack bottle caps into careful towers. She laughed, a clear, bright sound that cut through the heaviness of the day. Isatu felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not fear, not hope, expectation. Outside, unseen by those who mocked him, Ibrahim Mensa made a quiet call. His voice was calm, his words were few. "Proceed," he said. And somewhere beyond factory gates and borrowed judgments, a chain of consequences began to move slowly, deliberately toward the man who believed power belonged only to him. Suspension did not come with silence. It came with noise, digital, relentless, multiplying, faster than Aissatou Diallo could follow. By the time she reached home that afternoon, her phone vibrated with messages she did not open. Screenshots arrived from co-workers she barely knew. Links, laughing emojis, voice notes that began with sympathy and ended in curiosity. Someone had edited the video from the factory gate. They cut out Victor's insults and kept Ibrahim's stillness. They slowed the moment when security stepped forward. They froze on Ibrahim's worn jacket and cracked shoes. Over it all, a caption pulsed in bold letters: "This is the man she chose." Isatu stared at the screen until the words blurred. "I won't watch it again," she said aloud, more to herself than to anyone else. Ibrahim stood at the window, his back to the room, looking out at the narrow street below. "You don't need to," he said. "I already have." She turned sharply. "Why would you do that? So I know exactly what they think they're winning." That night, the landlord knocked. He was a thin man with careful eyes and a habit of smiling without warmth. He stood just outside the doorframe, as if avoiding contamination. "I've received complaints," he said. Isatu crossed her arms. "From who people?" he replied vaguely. "Noise, visitors, disruption." "I have a child," she said. "She's quiet." He nodded, uninterested. "And the man?" "What man?" He raised an eyebrow. "The one from the video." Isatu felt heat rise in her chest. "He doesn't live here. That's not what people believe the landlord said. Belief matters." She understood then. Belief had weight. It could move people. Evict them. "How much time?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "A week." After he left, Isatu sank onto the mattress, her strength finally giving way. The room felt smaller than ever. The walls seemed to press inward, heavy with judgment she could not escape. Ibrahim sat beside her without speaking. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "Everywhere I turn, it follows me." He placed a steady hand over hers. "It won't last. You keep saying that, and you keep surviving," he replied. "We're even." The next days passed in fragments. Isatu went to the factory, once hoping to speak to someone, anyone who might reconsider the suspension. She was turned away at the gate. The guard avoided her eyes. At the market, conversation stopped when she approached. A woman she had known for years whispered to another, nodding toward Isatu's child. She should have known better, someone said. Isatu walked on. The isolation was complete. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors kept their distance. Even the clinic receptionist who had once greeted Amara by name now spoke curtly, eyes flicking toward Ibrahim whenever he appeared. One afternoon, as Isatu waited in line to buy bread, a man behind her muttered, "Disgusting." She turned. "What did you say?" He shrugged. "Nothing." She wanted to scream. Instead, she paid and left. At home, she found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a printed screenshot of the video circled in red. Beneath it, written in pen, "Take responsibility." Isatu tore it in half, then quarters, then smaller pieces until her hands shook. That night, Amara struggled to breathe again. Not as violently as before, but enough to ignite fear. Isatu sat upright, counting breaths, her heart racing. Ibrahim watched closely, his jaw tight. "She needs a follow-up," he said. "Soon. I don't have money," Isatu replied, "and they don't want us there." "They will," he said. "This time." She looked at him. "You sound certain." "I am." The next morning, a car waited across the street. Not a taxi, not a neighbor's. Dark windows, engine running. It had been there before, she realized. Quiet, watchful. Are they watching us? She asked. Ibrahim followed her gaze. They're watching everything. Who? He paused. People who clean up messes. Her chest tightened. Is this about Victor? In part, he said. Then tell me, she said, frustration breaking through fear. Tell me what's happening. Ibrahim turned to her, his expression serious now. Not yet. She pulled her hand away. You ask me to trust you while my life falls apart. He nodded once. I know, and I won't ask forever. That afternoon, Zainab Kamau arrived. She did not knock loudly. She did not introduce herself to neighbors. She stepped into the room with the confidence of someone used to entering spaces where she did not belong. Aissatou Diallo, she asked. Isatu stood instinctively protective. Who are you? My name is Zainab Kamau, the woman said. I work with Ibrahim. Isatu froze. Work. Ibrahim closed the door gently behind her. Zainab's eyes moved quickly, taking in the room, the mattress, the child's toys made from scraps. Something unreadable crossed her face. We don't have much time, Zainab said, and I won't lie to you. Isatu's heart pounded. Then don't! Zainab looked directly at her. The situation at the factory is under review, not officially, yet. Victor Okeki has attracted attention. Isatu laughed bitterly. Because of me, because of patterns, Zainab replied. Yours is one of many. Isatu turned to Ibrahim. You knew. Yes, he said. You let them suspend me. I let them reveal themselves. Zainab continued. There are financial irregularities, abuse of authority, coercion. She paused. You are not the only one he targeted. Just the one he misjudged. Isatu's legs felt weak. What does that mean for us? It means, Zainab said carefully, that things may get worse before they get better. Isatu closed her eyes. Of course they will. But Zainab added, it also means you will not be alone. That night, the power went out. The room plunged into darkness, sudden and complete. Isatu reached for Amara instinctively. Outside voices rose, confusion, annoyance. They cut us off, Isatu whispered. Why? Ibrahim listened. Not cut, redirected. Moments later, the power returned. Isatu stared at the light bulb, stunned. How? Timing, Ibrahim said, softly. She turned to him slowly. You keep saying that word. Because he replied, everything depends on it. Later, when Amara finally slept, Isatu sat by the window watching the street. The car across the way was gone. She thought of the video, of the envelope, of the laughter that had followed her everywhere. For the first time in days, something shifted. Not relief, not victory. A sense that the world she had been trapped in, small, cruel, loud, was beginning to crack. And when it broke, the sound would be impossible to ignore. The crisis came without warning, as crises often do. It was early afternoon, the kind of hour when the city slowed into a false sense of calm. Aissatou Diallo sat on the edge of the mattress, folding clothes that no longer fit into a neat pile. Amara played at her feet, tapping bottle caps together, humming to herself. Then the humming stopped. Isatu felt it before she heard it. The subtle shift in air, the pause that lingered too long. She looked down. Amara's chest was moving too fast. Amara, Isatu whispered, already reaching for her. The child tried to inhale and failed. Her small shoulders rose sharply, then dropped. Her eyes widened, not in pain yet, but in confusion. The room filled with a thin, desperate sound that tore straight through Isatu's composure. No, Isatu said, panic exploding inside her. No, no. She scooped Amara up, pressing her against her chest, counting breaths that refused to settle. 1, 2, 3. Too fast, too shallow. Ibrahim, she shouted. He was there instantly. He took one look at Amara, and his face hardened, not with fear but with focus. He moved with urgency, now no longer measured or cautious. "Bag," he said. "Now!" Aissatou handed it to him, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Ibrahim searched quickly, pulling out the inhaler, checking it, then shaking his head. "Not enough," he said. "We're going!" Where Isatu cried. "Anywhere that will listen," he replied. They rushed outside. The street was busy, chaotic. Isatu waved frantically at passing cars, her voice breaking as she begged. Some slowed, saw Amara's face, then sped up. Others shook their heads apologetically. Isatu felt desperation claw at her throat. Ibrahim stepped into the road without hesitation and raised his hand, not pleading but commanding. A black sedan screeched to a halt inches from him. "Hospital," Ibrahim said to the driver. "Now." The driver hesitated, looking at Ibrahim's clothes, then at the child struggling to breathe. Something in Ibrahim's eyes made the decision for him. They were moving before Isatu could say another word. At the hospital entrance, security blocked the doors. "Emergency," Isatu shouted. "Please." The guard glanced at the child, then at Ibrahim. "Forms first." Amara gasped a sharp, frightening sound. Isatu fell to her knees. "Please," she begged. "She can't breathe." Ibrahim stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that cut through the noise. "Move," he said. The guard hesitated. "Sir." Ibrahim pulled out a phone. Not borrowed this time. Sleek, new. He dialed without looking away from the guard. "Emergency pediatric," he said into the phone. "Yes." "Now." There was a pause. His expression did not change. "I'm at the east entrance," he continued. "She's 3. Severe respiratory distress." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Open the door," he said. The guard swallowed and stepped aside. Inside, everything moved faster. Oxygen, a stretcher, doctors appearing from nowhere. Amara was taken from Isatu's arms, her cries fading as a mask was placed over her face. Isatu stood, frozen, empty-handed, her body shaking uncontrollably. "Stay with me," Ibrahim said quietly, guiding her to a chair. "Breathe," she clutched his sleeve. "Don't let them send us away." "They won't," he said. "How do you know?" "Because they already tried," he replied. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. A doctor finally emerged, a woman with tired eyes and clipped movements. "She's stable for now," the doctor said. "But this can't continue. She needs consistent treatment, monitoring. This isn't something you manage at home." Isatu nodded numbly. "I understand." "Do you?" the doctor asked gently. "Because this costs money." Isatu's shoulders slumped. "I'll find a way." The doctor glanced at Ibrahim. "You're the father," "Yes," Ibrahim said. "Then we need consent forms and a payment plan." Ibrahim nodded. "Prepare whatever you need." He stepped aside to make a call. Isatu watched him, her mind spinning. This was different. Everything was different. The confidence, the way staff responded to him now, not dismissive, not indulgent, but attentive. When he returned, the doctor's demeanor had shifted. "We're transferring her," she said, "to a private pediatric wing." Isatu stared. "Private?" "Yes," the doctor replied, already turning. "Follow me." They passed through doors Isatu had never gone through before. Cleaner halls, quieter air, machines that hummed softly instead of clanking. Amara lay sleeping, oxygen steady her face, peaceful for the first time in hours. Isatu sat beside the bed and cried silently. Later, when the room was still, she turned to Ibrahim. "You did this," she said. "It wasn't an accusation, it was a realization." He nodded once. "I made a call." "To who?" He hesitated. "People who owe me," he said carefully. Her heart pounded. "Why would anyone owe you anything?" He met her gaze, and for the first time he did not deflect. "Because," he said slowly, "I once built the systems they depend on." The words hung between them, heavy and unfinished. Isatu searched his face. "What does that mean?" "It means," he replied, "that Victor Okeke is not as untouchable as he believes." Her breath caught. "You're saying this is about him?" "It's about everyone who thinks cruelty is invisible," Ibrahim said. Aissatou leaned back overwhelmed. "You could have told me." "I wanted to," he said softly. "But once you know, you can't unknow, and knowing changes how people treat you." She looked at Amara sleeping peacefully behind glass. "They already treat me differently." "Yes," Ibrahim agreed, "but soon they'll pretend they never did." That night, as machines beeped steadily and nurses moved quietly outside the room, Isatu realized something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer just about survival. It was about exposure. Outside the hospital, unseen by those who mocked her, files were being opened, records pulled, calls returned. Victor Okeke was still laughing somewhere, still confident in his control. He did not yet know that the moment he had pushed a sick child aside, he had crossed a line no amount of authority could protect him from. And when the reckoning came, it would not arrive loudly. It would arrive precisely. The private pediatric wing felt like a different world. The lights were softer. The floors gleamed without the sharp smell of disinfectant. Machines hummed quietly, measured and patient, as if time itself moved more carefully there. Aissatou Diallo sat beside Amara's bed, afraid that if she shifted even slightly, the fragile peace would break. Amara slept, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that no longer frightened Isatu. Oxygen flowed steadily. A monitor traced gentle lines that Isatu watched as if they were the child's heartbeat written out in code. For the first time in days, Isatu allowed herself to breathe. But relief did not erase confusion. Across the room, Ibrahim Mensa stood by the window, speaking softly into his phone. His posture was different here, still calm, but unmistakably assured. He did not lower his voice out of fear of being overheard. He spoke like a man who expected to be obeyed. "Yes," he said. "All documentation. Today." A pause. "No, not later." Another pause. "Because delays are how people hide." He ended the call and turned to Isatu. She watched him carefully, now noticing details she had once ignored: the straightness of his shoulders, the ease with which he occupied space. This was not the man people pushed away at hospital doors. "You didn't tell me," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know." "How long?" she asked. "How long have you been like this?" He hesitated. "Long enough. That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "but it's the one I can give you right now." Isatu looked back at Amara. "They treated us differently the moment you made that call." "Yes. They moved us here. They apologized." Her voice trembled. "They never do that." Ibrahim walked closer. "Because they think kindness is a favor," he said, "not a duty." She turned to him. "Then why live the way you do? Why let them treat you like nothing?" He did not answer immediately. He looked out the window, at the city lights beginning to glow as evening settled in. "Because," he said slowly, "systems don't reveal themselves to men they fear. They reveal themselves to men they dismiss." The words sent a chill through her. "You let them humiliate you," she said. "You let them humiliate us." "Yes," he replied softly. "And I will never ask you to forgive me for that." She swallowed. "Then why am I still here? Because you chose kindness without knowing who I was," said. "And that matters more than anything I own." A nurse entered, interrupting them. She smiled politely, deferentially, as she checked Amara's vitals. "She'll stay overnight," the nurse said. "The doctor will see her again in the morning." "Thank you," Isatu said. The nurse glanced at Ibrahim. "Everything is arranged," she added. When she left, Isatu felt the weight of those words. Everything is arranged. Later that night, Zainab Kamau returned. She carried a slim folder under her arm, her expression serious. She greeted Aissatou with a nod, then turned to Ibrahim. "It's worse than we thought," Zainab said. Isatu stiffened. "Worse? Victor Okeki has been careful." Zainab continued, "But not careful enough. There are patterns, suspensions, terminations, reviews that follow refusals." She opened the folder. "This isn't just about harassment. It's extortion." Aisatu's stomach tightened. "Other women." "Yes," Zainab replied. "Some paid the price. Some stayed silent." Isatu closed her eyes. Faces flashed through her mind, co-workers who had disappeared, whose desks had been cleared overnight. "And me?" she asked. "What happens now?" Zainab met her gaze. "Now we document everything, and we wait for what Isatu demanded, for him to make a mistake," Ibrahim said, quietly. "He already has," Isatu replied. "Over and over." "Yes," Ibrahim agreed, "but now it will be visible." The next morning, Isatu returned to the factory, not as an employee, but as someone waiting. She stood across the street watching workers enter, watching Victor Okeke stride through the gate, laughing confident, untouched by the fear he spread so easily. Ibrahim remained in the car unseen. "Are you sure?" Isatu asked, her hands clenched in her lap. "Yes," he said. "He needs to believe nothing has changed." Inside the factory, Victor was already performing outrage. "She thinks she can disappear and come back," he snapped to a supervisor. "We don't reward disobedience." By noon, a notice circulated. Aissatou Diallo's suspension would become termination pending investigation. Victor signed it with satisfaction. He did not see the man in the dark suit entering the administrative building that afternoon. He did not notice the quiet shift among senior staff, the sudden urgency, the careful tones. He laughed when he was called into a meeting. "Finally," he said, "someone has sense." The meeting room was full when he arrived, not with his usual allies, but with unfamiliar faces. Legal counsel, external auditors, a woman he did not recognize. Zainab Kamau sat near the head of the table. Victor frowned. "What is this?" Zainab spoke calmly. "An inquiry." Victor scoffed. "Into what?" "Into you," she replied. Files were opened, screens lit up, dates, names, payments traced like veins beneath the surface of his authority. Victor's confidence cracked. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Who authorized this?" The door opened. Ibrahim Mensa stepped inside. The room went silent. Victor stared at him, confusion giving way to disbelief. "You," he said, laughing weakly. "What is this joke?" Ibrahim did not smile. He placed a folder on the table. "My name is Ibrahim Mensa," he said evenly, "and this factory operates on land owned by my company." Victor's breath caught. "Your employment," Ibrahim continued, "has been under review for some time. Today's incident expedited the process." Victor stood abruptly. "You can't, I can," Ibrahim said, "and I am." By the time Victor was escorted out, his laughter was gone. Outside, Isatu watched from the car as security escorted Victor through the gate he once ruled. She felt no triumph, no joy, only a quiet, steady release. That evening, she returned to the hospital. Amara smiled when she entered the room, reaching for her with small, unsteady hands. Isatu lifted her carefully, holding her close. Ibrahim stood nearby, watching. "This isn't over," Isatu said. "No," he agreed. "It's just begun." Victor Okeki's removal did not bring peace, not immediately. In the days that followed his escort from the factory gates, the city buzzed with speculation. Rumors layered themselves over facts until truth became just another version of events people chose to believe. Some said Victor had angered the wrong people. Others whispered about politics, about money moving in places it shouldn't have. Very few mentioned Aissatou Diallo, and when they did, it was not kindly. She must have slept with someone powerful. No poor woman wins like that. Things don't just change. Aissatou heard it all. She returned to the hospital each morning, her steps steady, her face calm. Amara was improving slowly, carefully, but the doctors were clear recovery would not be quick and it would not be cheap. Ibrahim handled the logistics without discussion. Forms were signed, appointments scheduled. Bills disappeared before Isatu could see the numbers. That frightened her, more than the hospital corridors ever had. "You can't keep doing this," she said one evening as they sat beside Amara's bed. "You can't decide everything." Ibrahim looked at her. "I'm not deciding your life. You're shaping it," she replied. He considered that. "Then tell me how to stop." Aissatou opened her mouth and closed it again. She didn't know the answer. She only knew that the ground beneath her feet no longer felt solid, and she didn't trust comfort that arrived too suddenly. At night, when the ward quieted, doubts crept in. Had she become exactly what people accused her of being, a woman carried forward by a man's power rather than her own endurance? The thought settled like a weight on her chest. The factory called 3 days later. Human Resources requested a meeting. Zainab Kamau accompanied her, crisp and composed. They sat across from a panel that suddenly remembered words like procedure and fairness. "We acknowledge," the HR director said carefully, "that mistakes were made." Isatu waited. "Your suspension was improper," the director continued. "Your termination notice has been rescinded." Zainab slid a document across the table. "And compensation." There was hesitation, then agreement. Isatu left the building with paperwork in her hand and no sense of victory in her heart. "They're afraid," she said quietly as they reached the car. "Yes," Zainab replied. "Fear teaches faster than empathy." At home, the atmosphere had changed. Neighbors who once avoided her now nodded politely. Some smiled too brightly. The landlord returned her deposit early, apologizing for misunderstandings. Isatu accepted nothing with ease. When Ibrahim suggested moving to a better apartment closer to the hospital, safer, she refused. "This is still my home," she said. "I won't erase my life because it's inconvenient." He nodded, respecting the boundary without question. But the city did not forget Ibrahim. A journalist appeared outside the hospital one afternoon asking questions. Another followed the next day. Headlines began to form. Careful at first, then bold. Whistleblower exposes factory abuse. Mysterious benefactor intervenes in labor dispute. No one printed Ibrahim's name yet, but it hovered, waiting. Zainab warned them. When this breaks fully, nothing stays private. Isatu felt a familiar tightening in her chest. "I didn't agree to be a symbol." "You didn't choose it," Zainab said gently. "But symbols choose people like you." That night, Ibrahim did not sleep. Isatu noticed him standing by the window long after Amara had drifted off his phone, lighting his face in the dark. "You're preparing for something," she said. "Yes," he replied. "For what?" "For consequences." The next morning, Ibrahim was gone. Not vanished, just absent. No note, no explanation. Zainab called once briefly, then said nothing more. Isatu tried not to panic. She had learned that Ibrahim moved in ways that did not ask permission. But when 2 days passed without word, the fear returned sharp and old. Had he left because his role was finished? Had she become a liability? On the 3rd day, she received a message. Watch the evening news. She did. The broadcast opened with familiar images. The factory gates workers' faces blurred. Victor Okeki being escorted away. Then the anchor paused. "Tonight, we reveal the identity of the man behind the investigation." The screen shifted. Isatu's breath caught. There he was, Ibrahim Mensa, clean-shaven, composed, seated in a studio chair. His posture was unmistakable, now the mask fully removed. The anchor spoke his name. Chairman, founder, billionaire. Isatu felt the room spin. He owns half the infrastructure contracts in the city, the anchor continued. Hospitals, transit, housing. The interview played. Ibrahim spoke calmly about ethics, about accountability, about systems that devour the vulnerable when left unchecked. He did not mention Aissatou by name, but he did say this: the measure of a society is how it treats those it believes it can ignore. Isatu turned off the television. Her hands were shaking, not with surprise, but with grief. This was it. The moment everything she had feared became real. By morning, the city knew. By afternoon, the knock came. Isatu opened the door to find reporters' cameras already lifting. Ms. Diallo, did you know, are you in a relationship with Mr. Mensah? Did he help you because you're the mother of his child? She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. Amara coughed softly from the bed. Isatu crossed the room and held her close. That evening, Ibrahim returned, not quietly this time, not unnoticed. Isatu did not run to him. She did not shout. She stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You should have told me," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I should have. You let me believe you were leaving." "I let you believe you could choose," he said. "Knowing who I am removes that choice." She studied him, this man she had known in fragments. "Do you know what they'll say?" now she asked. "About me, yes. And you did it anyway, yes." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Isatu spoke. "I didn't love you because you were powerful." "I know," he said, "and I won't stay with you because you are." "I know," he repeated. Her shoulders sagged. "Then we start again." He nodded. "However you want." Outside, the city roared with revelation. Inside, Isatu held her child and faced a future that no longer belonged to silence. Morning came with a weight Aissatou Diallo had never carried before. Not hunger, not fear of eviction, not the quiet dread of hospital bills. This was heavier visibility, the kind that pressed in from all sides, demanding explanations she was not ready to give. Outside her building, a car idled with its engine running. Across the street, a man pretended to check his phone while watching her door. By noon, 3 different journalists had left business cards with the neighbor downstairs. Isatu did not open the door. Inside, Amara slept fitfully, her breathing steady but fragile. Isatu sat beside her, one hand resting on the child's back, the other gripping her own knee to keep it from shaking. Ibrahim Mensah sat at the small table, his jacket folded neatly beside him. For the first time since the truth had surfaced, he looked tired. "This won't slow down," he said quietly. Isatu did not look at him. "I know. They'll keep asking, digging. They'll look for contradictions." She nodded. "They always do. I can move you," he offered. "Today, somewhere private, secure." She turned, then her eyes sharp. "I'm not hiding. I'm not asking you to hide," he replied. "I'm asking you to breathe. I've been breathing my whole life," she said. "This," she gestured toward the window, the unseen watchers. "This doesn't get to take that from me." Ibrahim held her gaze, then inclined his head slightly. "Then we set rules." "Rules," she echoed. "For access," he said. "For what you owe no one." She considered that. "I speak when I choose." "Yes." "I don't answer questions about my body or my child." "Yes." "And I don't become your evidence," she added. "For anything." His expression softened. "You never were." Zainab Kamau arrived an hour later with a folder and a plan. "Victor Okeke has retained counsel," she said without preamble. "He's claiming retaliation." Isatu laughed, once sharp and humorless. "Of course he is. He's also claiming coercion." Zainab continued, "that he was forced out by a hidden power." Ibrahim raised an eyebrow. Hidden Zainab allowed herself a brief smile. "Apparently." Isatu leaned back. "What does that mean for us?" "It means Zainab said he's going to try to make you the story." Aissatu's jaw tightened. "I won't testify." "You may not have a choice," Zainab replied gently. "But you do have control over how." They spent the afternoon preparing not statements but boundaries, what Aisatu would say if called, what she would not, how to redirect questions without lying. By evening, exhaustion settled in. That was when the call came. A former co-worker, Lydia, a woman Isatu barely knew, beyond shared shifts and tired smiles. "They contacted me," Lydia said, her voice trembling. "Victor's lawyer. They want me to say you planned this, that you used him." Isatu closed her eyes. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth," Lydia replied, "that he did the same to me." Silence followed, the thick, stunned silence. "There are others," Lydia continued. "We're talking now, quietly, but we're ready." Isatu felt something shift inside her chest. Not relief, not victory, but recognition. This was never just about her. By nightfall, messages arrived from numbers she didn't recognize. Short, careful. "I saw what he did." "You're not alone. If you speak, I will too." Isatu handed the phone to Ibrahim. "They don't need me to lead them," she said. "They already know where they're going." He nodded. "And you?" She looked at Amara. "I'm going to make sure my daughter grows up knowing the truth doesn't belong to the loudest voice." The summons arrived the next morning, an official request for testimony before a labor tribunal. Dates, times, a list of names, some familiar, some not. Victor Okeki's name sat at the top. Isatu folded the paper carefully and set it aside. At the tribunal building, the air was different, thicker with anticipation than fear. Cameras lined the steps. Protesters stood across the street, holding signs Isatu didn't read. Zainab guided her through a side entrance. Inside the room was cool and quiet. Rows of seats filled slowly. Isatu recognized Lydia. Two other women nodded at her, eyes bright with resolve. Victor entered last. He looked smaller than Isatu remembered. Not powerless, never that, but diminished. His smile was tight, rehearsed. When Isatu took the stand, the room leaned in. She spoke slowly, clearly. She described the comments, the pressure, the threats. She did not embellish. She did not cry. When asked about Ibrahim's role, she answered plainly. "He did not ask me to speak," she said. "He did not tell me what to say. He did not promise me anything." Victor's lawyer stood. "But you benefited." Isatu met his gaze. So did the people who stopped being hurt. Murmurs rippled through the room. When Lydia spoke, then the others, the pattern emerged, undeniable, damning. Victor's interruptions grew frantic, his denials louder. By the time the panel recessed, the outcome felt inevitable. Outside the city, waited. Hours later, the decision came down, termination upheld, charges referred, an independent audit ordered across the factory's operations. Victor did not look at Isatu as he was escorted out. On the steps, microphones surged forward. Isatu raised a hand, not to answer but to quiet them. "I'm not here because of who I know," she said. "I'm here because of what happened." She turned and walked away. That night, back in the small room that still felt like home, Isatu finally allowed herself to sit in silence. Ibrahim brought tea. He set it down and did not speak. "Tomorrow," she said after a while, "they'll find something else to say." "Yes," he replied. "And the day after that, yes." She smiled faintly. "Good. Then we keep living." He nodded. Together, she considered him the man who had been many things to many people, and exactly one thing to her when it mattered. "We keep living," she said. "That's enough for now." Outside, the city buzzed with conclusions it thought it had reached. Inside, Aissatou Diallo rested her hand on her daughter's back and felt for the first time the quiet certainty of ground that would not give way. The days after the tribunal did not slow down. They sharpened. Where once there had been whispers, there were now statements. Where there had been laughter, there were now denials. The city shifted its weight uneasily, like a crowd realizing it had cheered too early, and for the wrong reasons. Aissatou Diallo felt it everywhere. At the clinic, nurses spoke with careful politeness, their smiles measured. At the market, vendors greeted her by name, as if they always had. On the street, people stared openly now, not with mockery but with curiosity that bordered on reverence. She did not like it. Visibility still felt like a cost she had not agreed to pay. Amara's condition improved steadily, though the doctors warned it would require long-term care. Isatu listened, asked questions, took notes. She refused to let relief make her careless. "You're doing well," one doctor said kindly. Isatu nodded. "I'm doing what's necessary." At home, Ibrahim watched her with a quiet attentiveness that did not intrude. He no longer tried to anticipate her choices. He waited. That was new. Zainab Kamau brought updates, daily briefings that sounded less like strategy and more like cleanup. "Victor's legal team is collapsing," she said one afternoon. 2 more women came forward this morning. Isatu closed her eyes. "How many enough?" Zainab replied, "More than enough." "What happens to them?" Isatu asked. After this, Zainab hesitated. "Some will leave, some will stay. Not all outcomes are fair." Isatu absorbed that. "But they'll be seen." "Yes," Zainab said, "and that matters." The factory reopened under interim management. Auditors arrived. Posters about ethics and reporting channels went up overnight as if printed morality could erase years of silence. Isatu was offered her job back with a promotion. She declined. The HR director blinked. "You're sure?" "Yes," Isatu said. "I don't want to return to a place that needed suffering to change." They offered compensation instead. She accepted that, not as reward but as restitution. Still, the city had not finished with her. A televised panel invited her to speak. She refused. A charity asked her to become a spokesperson. She declined again. "She's wasting an opportunity," someone said online. Isatu did not respond. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, she sat with Ibrahim on the steps outside her building. The street hummed softly. Children played nearby, their laughter unremarkable and precious. "They want me to become something," she said quietly. "Yes," Ibrahim replied. "They always do. I don't want to be a symbol." He nodded. "Then don't be. It's not that simple." "No," he agreed. "It never is." She looked at him then. "What do you want?" The question seemed to surprise him. "I want," he said slowly, "to finish what I started." And after that he considered. "To step back." She raised an eyebrow. "From what?" "From being necessary," he said. "I built systems so others wouldn't have to depend on me. Somewhere along the way, that purpose got lost." Isatu studied his face. "And me?" He did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was careful. "I want to earn whatever place I have in your life," he said. "Not assume it." That night, Isatu dreamed of factory floors and hospital corridors of voices, rising and falling like waves. She woke before dawn with a heaviness in her chest. By morning, the threat arrived. A letter, plain envelope, no return address. Inside a single page, "Withdraw your statements, or the next story will be about your child." Isatu's hands went cold. She read it twice, 3 times. The words did not change. Ibrahim found her sitting at the table, the letter spread out before her. "Zainab needs to see this," he said immediately. Isatu shook her head. "Not yet," he frowned. "This is serious." "So am I," she replied. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street. Amara slept in the next room, unaware of the threat wrapped in adult language. "They think fear will make me small again," Isatu said. "I won't let them." Ibrahim's voice tightened. "We can increase security. That's not the point. "What is that? I won't be silent," she said. "Not now." Zainab was furious when she saw the letter. "This is obstruction," she said. "Intimidation. It's desperation," Aissatou replied. "And dangerous." Yes, they reported it. An investigation was opened. Names surfaced, associates of Victor Okeke, men who had benefited from his silence. The city shifted again. Public support hardened into resolve. Worker unions organized. Anonymous testimonies flooded in. The story grew larger than any one person could control. That frightened the people who had counted on quiet. Isatu was called back to the tribunal, not to testify but to witness a new phase. Charges expanded. Arrests followed. When Victor was brought in again, this time in handcuffs, the room was silent. He looked at Isatu, then not with hatred, but with disbelief, as if he still did not understand how this had happened. Isatu met his gaze without triumph. Afterward, outside the building, microphones surged again. She spoke only once. "I did not break this system," she said. "It broke itself when it decided some lives were disposable." She turned and left. That evening, Ibrahim packed a small bag. "I'll be gone a few days," he said. "There are things to finalize." She nodded. "I know." He hesitated at the door. "When I come back." She finished the thought for him. "We'll see where we are." He smiled, small reel. "That's fair." While he was gone, Isatu settled into a new rhythm. She enrolled Amara in a specialized care program. She took a short course in community sanitation management skills she had earned through years of unseen labor. For the first time, her future felt authored, not assigned. When Ibrahim returned, it was quietly. No cameras, no announcements. He found Isatu in the courtyard, watching Amara take careful steps across the dust, her laughter ringing clear. "I resigned from the board," he said simply. Isatu turned. "Why? Because systems shouldn't rely on my presence," he replied. "They should survive my absence." She considered that. "And you?" "I'll do less," he said, "but better." They stood in silence as Amara stumbled, then righted herself determined. Isatu felt something settle, not certainty but peace, with uncertainty. The city would keep talking. Power would keep shifting. Justice would never be complete. But here in this moment, something fragile and real had been reclaimed. And that was enough to keep going. The city gathered for celebration. Banners stretched across the main boulevard. Screens rose in the square like open eyes. The mayor's office had announced a public unveiling, a new chapter for the city, and people came in crowds eager for optimism after weeks of scandal. Aissatou Diallo did not plan to attend. She watched the broadcast from a neighbor's television while Amara napped, her small chest rising steadily. The announcer's voice was bright, confident. Words like renewal and accountability floated easily, as if they could erase the past by repetition alone. Then her phone rang. Zainab Kamau's name lit the screen. "They're changing the order," Zainab said without greeting. "Victor is going to speak." Isatu straightened. "Why would they let him?" "Because he asked," Zainab replied. "And because some people still think this can be managed with optics." Isatu felt a familiar tightening anger tempered by clarity. "He wants to control the ending." "Yes," Zainab said, "and he plans to do it by dragging you into it." Isatu closed her eyes. She could already see it, the implication. The insinuation, the careful phrasing meant to stain without stating. "I'll come," she said. The square was full when she arrived. Music played, applause rippled, security moved in practiced patterns. Isatu took a seat near the back, unnoticed, her posture calm. She had learned how to be invisible when it mattered. Victor Okeke appeared on the stage in a tailored suit that tried too hard to restore authority. He smiled as if he had never been escorted out of anywhere, as if he had not been named, documented, charged. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth. We are here to talk about responsibility. Isatu felt the audacity like a physical force. Victor spoke of misunderstandings, of internal conflicts, of personal relationships that complicated professional environments. He never said her name, but he didn't need to. He let the crowd fill in the blanks. There are times, he said, when powerful individuals manipulate narratives to serve private interests. A few heads nodded. Cameras panned. Aisatu felt heat, rise not shame this time, but resolve. Victor leaned closer to the microphone, and sometimes he added, "Those narratives are built on sympathy." That was the moment. The screens behind him flickered. The image changed. The square fell quiet. Documents appeared, dates, emails, transfers, cleanly presented, unmistakable. Audio played. Victor's voice recorded pressuring an employee. Another clip followed, and another. The murmurs grew into a roar. Victor froze. A new figure walked onto the stage, unannounced, unhurried. Ibrahim Mensa. He wore a simple dark suit. No insignia, no flourish. He did not look at the cameras. He looked at Victor. "I asked for transparency," Ibrahim said into the microphone, his voice carrying without strain. "You asked for a stage." The crowd erupted. Victor's face drained of color. "You can't. This is Ibrahim." Raised a hand. The sound fell away. "This city does not belong to one man," he said. "Not to me, not to you. It belongs to the people who keep it running when no one is watching." He gestured and the screens shifted again. Testimonies anonymized at first, then named with consent. Faces appeared. Voices steadied as they spoke. Victor tried to leave. Security stopped him. Isatu stood. She did not rush the stage. She walked slowly, deliberately, until she was visible to the cameras. The crowd recognized her now. The whispers surged. Ibrahim saw her and stepped back, giving her space without announcement. Isatu took the microphone. "I didn't come here to be part of this," she said. Her voice was steady, unadorned. "But since my silence has been used as a weapon, I'll speak once." The square held its breath. "I was mocked," she continued, "threatened, pushed aside when my child needed help. I was told my life was a mistake because the man beside me looked poor." She paused, letting the words land. "The truth is simple," Isatu said. "Kindness doesn't come with receipts. Dignity doesn't announce itself. And power, real power, shows up when it's needed, not when it's applauded." She turned briefly to Ibrahim, not to acknowledge his wealth, but his presence. Then she faced the crowd again. "If this city is changing, it won't be because one man fell. It will be because many people decided to stop looking away." Applause broke like thunder. Victor shouted over it, protests, denials, but the sound swallowed him whole. Security escorted him from the stage, this time with no hesitation, no cameras to soften the moment. As he passed Isatu, he did not look at her. The mayor stepped forward, flustered, promising investigations and reforms. The words felt smaller now measured against what had already been shown. Ibrahim did not return to the microphone. He stood where he was, hands at his sides, letting the moment pass without claiming it. Later, when the square began to empty and the banners sagged in the heat, Isatu found him at the edge of the crowd. "You didn't warn me," she said. "I didn't want to take your choice," he replied. She nodded. "You didn't." They walked together away from the noise. At home, Amara woke smiling, reaching for both of them. Isatu lifted her, feeling the steady warmth of her body, the miracle of breath that came easily now. On the news that night, the headline was clear. "City confronts its own reflection." Isatu turned off the television. She knew the work wasn't finished. Consequences would unfold. Appeals would be filed. People would argue about credit and blame. But the truth had crossed a threshold. And once crossed, it would not be pushed back into silence. The city woke the morning after the square with a quieter voice. No banners, no speeches, just conversations measured, cautious, necessary. People argued about what they had seen, what it meant, who deserved credit. The radios replayed clips, the papers printed timelines, lawyers issued statements designed to slow momentum that no longer waited. Aissatou Diallo did not read any of it. She rose early as she always had and prepared breakfast, with the same careful movements she'd learned when food was scarce. Amara sat on the floor, stacking bottle caps into towers that wobbled but did not fall. Each breath the child took felt like a small victory that did not need witnesses. Outside footsteps paused near the door, then moved on. For the first time in weeks, no one knocked. Ibrahim Mensa arrived late that morning without entourage or announcement. He carried a small bag and nothing else. They finalized it, he said quietly. Victor is being charged. The company will be restructured, under oversight. Isatu nodded. Good. That's all you'll say. Yes. He studied her, searching for anger relief, something he could respond to. He found neither. What he saw instead was steadiness. I won't ask you to celebrate, he said. Then don't, she replied. They sat together in the narrow room, the city's hum filtering through the window. Isatu poured tea and pushed a cup toward him. I've been offered things, Ibrahim said after a moment. Positions, apologies dressed as opportunities. And I declined most of them. She raised an eyebrow. Most I agreed to one, he said. A trust, independently governed, focused on worker protections and healthcare access. Isatu considered this. Why tell me? Because I don't want to decide my life without you knowing, he said. Not anymore. She nodded slowly. That's better. The days that followed brought closure in pieces. The factory's interim management issued public apologies and private settlements. Some workers returned. Others left with compensation and the quiet dignity of having been believed. Lydia called once, her voice lighter than Isatu had ever heard it. I start a new job on Monday, she said. They asked me about boundaries. I told them I know exactly where mine are. Isatu smiled. At the clinic, Amara's care plan stabilized. The doctors spoke in clear terms, now maintenance monitoring hope that did not need exaggeration. Isatu listened and asked questions. She wrote everything down. One afternoon, Zainab Kamau stopped by with a thin envelope. This is yours, she said, handing it over. Isatu opened it to find confirmation of compensation. Enough to breathe, not enough to forget who she was. I don't want a press conference, Isatu said. Zainab smiled. We assumed as much. Thank you, Isatu added, for doing your job. Zainab inclined her head, for reminding us why it matters. When the apartment became too small for Amara's energy, Isatu took her outside. The courtyard felt familiar again. Dust, laughter, ordinary life reclaiming its space. Children played. Neighbors nodded. Some offered shy greetings. No one asked questions. That evening, Ibrahim stood at the gate watching from a distance. He did not step in until Isatu waved him over. You don't hover, she observed. I'm learning, he replied. They walked together as the sun lowered shadows, stretching long and gentle. Isatu felt the city's weight, lighten, not gone, but redistributed. I'm not moving, she said suddenly. He stopped. I didn't ask you to. I know, she said. I'm telling you anyway. This place taught me how to survive. I won't pretend it didn't. I wouldn't want you to, he said. They continued walking. Later that night, after Amara slept, Isatu and Ibrahim sat at the small table, the single bulb casting a warm circle of light. There's something else, Isatu said. He waited. I won't be introduced, she continued. Not as your partner, not as proof of anything. He nodded. You won't. And I won't rush, she added. We've lived in emergency mode long enough. He smiled softly. Time is the one thing I'm finally willing to give. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new pattern. Aissatou enrolled in a certification program related to sanitation management work she knew intimately, now given language and leverage. She studied at night, when Amara slept the glow of her phone, replaced by the steady light of purpose. Ibrahim stepped back from headlines. He attended meetings without cameras. He listened more than he spoke. One afternoon, they returned to the hospital, not in panic, but for a routine check. The receptionist greeted them by name. No one whispered. No one hurried them away. Isatu held Amara's hand and felt something unfamiliar bloom trust. On the walk home, Ibrahim slowed near the bus stop where they had first met. The bench was still there, paint-chipped ordinary as ever. "You could have told me then," Isatu said. "Yes," he replied, "but then you might have chosen differently." She considered that. "Or I might not," he smiled. "We'll never know." They stood in silence, the city passing around them. Months later, when the case concluded and the final judgments were read, the news cycle moved on. Another scandal rose. Another story demanded attention. Isatu noticed and let it pass. She had learned that justice did not need permanence to matter. It needed momentum, and it needed people willing to hold it long enough for others to see it. One evening, as rain softened the dust and cooled the air, Isatu watched Amara sleep, her breathing steady and strong. She felt a quiet gratitude that did not ask for applause. Ibrahim stood beside her. "This is enough," Isatu said. Yes, he agreed. "It is." Outside the city continued imperfect learning alive. Inside, a small family found its rhythm built not on secrets or spectacle, but on choice. And that Isatu knew was the truest kind of wealth. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a quieter truth, settling into place. What Aissatou Diallo's journey reminds us is not that wealth reveals itself, but that dignity does. Long before the city knew who Ibrahim Mensa was, Aissatou had already chosen him as a human being. She chose kindness when it was costly. She chose responsibility when it brought ridicule. She chose courage without knowing there would ever be a reward. And that choice shaped everything that followed. In real life, injustice rarely announces itself as evil. It arrives disguised as routine, as jokes that go too far, as power used just this once. It survives because people believe silence is safer than truth. What changed this story was not a billionaire's intervention, but a woman's refusal to disappear. When Isatu stood her ground, others found the strength to speak. When one voice held steady, many more followed. This story is not about being rescued. It is about being seen. It is about the quiet workers who clean floors, raise children, and carry the weight of systems that rarely notice them until something breaks. Healing does not come from revenge, and justice does not come from humiliation. They come when dignity is restored and when people are allowed to live without fear. If there is a lesson here, it is this: your worth is not defined by how the world labels you in its loudest moments. It is defined by what you choose when no one is clapping. Kindness is never wasted. Integrity is never invisible, and even when the truth arrives late, it arrives with power. If this story moved you, take a moment to share what it stirred in you. What part of Aissatou's journey stayed with you the most? Your thoughts matter, and someone reading them may find the courage they need. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, stories of justice, healing, and quiet strength, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. More voices are waiting to be heard. More truths are waiting to rise.